Record to the cloud. Okay. And let's admit all. Diana, are you able to see the waiting room? I'm gonna change your role, Diana.
Yeah, I don't see the waiting room.
Can you focus on
On letting people in?
yeah,
Yeah, for sure. I can see them now.
because you could see them. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, folks are coming into the meeting. Thank you everyone for joining. And as they keep rolling in, let's just go ahead and kick off as we have a limited time here to be together today. So welcome to the CDBG Citizen Advisory Committee for Texas. This is the first time that we're bringing both committees together. So this is really exciting. We've been working as Committee 1 and Committee 2, and now today we're bringing everyone together, which is a great opportunity. So I'm Katja Woke, and I'm one of the co-chairs. I'm co-chair of Committee 2. I'm with the Heart Research Institute. We're a research institute that's at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and I'd like to kick it over to my co-chair.
Good morning, everybody. Amanda Fenwick. I'm the co-chair for Committee 1, and so great to see you all today. Thanks, Katja.
Yes, it's been some time, a bit of time since we've been together. As you know, we created, distributed, discussed a survey in that time, and now is the moment where we want to come together and discuss how do we move forward and get a little bit more continuity in a program of work, right? So that's what we're going to be discussing today. That's the point of today's meeting. But before we do that, we would like to go around and do a round of introductions, seeing as how, again, this is the first time that Committee 1 and Committee 2 are coming together. So if you could please just state your name, your institution that you represent, or region you represent, area you represent, and which committee you're with, then that would be great, a great way to get us going. So I'm just going to go around in the order of my screen. And actually, Diana, Dr. Delon-Hill, you're up first on my screen. So if you would please just say hello to everyone.
Hi, my name is Diana Delon-Hill, and I am with the Heart Research Institute.
And Diana's going to be helping us to manage the meeting and take notes, and we'll be listening in on our discussion. So thanks for joining us today. Colleen, Dr. Jones, I have you up next.
Yes, thank you, Katja. My name is Colleen Jones. I'm with the Texas General Land Office as a project manager, and I am a liaison for helping out the committee in any way I can, and to assure that it's following
Literally can't hear anything.
purpose that it has set forth. You can't hear me?
I can hear you. Are others having trouble hearing Colleen?
No, I can hear you.
Sylvia, were you having trouble?
I know Sylvia was having some computer problems,
Okay,
so I'm not sure if that's affecting it.
it could be. Please, if you're having any technical difficulties,
Well,
chat.
I already told Colleen that I was having computer issues.
I'm going to mute Sylvia. Please, if you're having technical difficulties, you may use the chat function to let us know. And Diana, if you could help us to monitor that chat as well, that would be very helpful. So thank you for that. Now, apologies, I haven't met a lot of you, but if you don't mind me being informal, I only see a lot of first names here, and I'm not sure of your titles for everyone. So I'm just going to use first names as I go along, and apologies if I mispronounce them. Next up on the screen, I have Gwyneth.
I'm Gwyneth Tevis. I'm the Director of Planning and Development for the City of Wharton, and I am a member of Committee 1.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. And next up, I have Charles.
Morning, I'm Charles Burchett. I am the CERT Program Director, Community Emergency Response Teams for Jasper, Newton, and Sabine counties. I'm also chairman of the Jasper and Newton counties Long-Term Recovery Group.
Thank you for joining us. Next, I have Derek.
Hello, everybody. I'm Derek Katzelson. I'm representing the city of Edinburgh as a private citizen. In my professional life, I work with GrantWorks at the moment. Thank you. I'm the secretary for Committee 2.
Yes, and thank you for your leadership role there, Derek. Next, we have Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Holcomb. I work for the city of Deer Park. I'm on Committee 2. I'm our floodplain manager here in town.
Thank you for joining. Next on the screen, I have Jamie.
Good morning. Hi, Mr. Rosado with Hidalgo County Drainage District number 1. Just listening in as a guest.
Thank you for joining. And next up, I have the Portland Chamber, Shelley.
Hi, I'm Shelley Stewart. I'm President and CEO of the Portland Chamber of Commerce, and I'm with Committee 1.
And Shelley's also part of our leadership team, so thank you, Shelley, for your role there. Next on the screen, I have Christy.
Yes, hi. I'm sorry. There we go. We're on. I'm Christy Hadnot. At the present, I am part of Committee 2, and I am the grants administrator for the city of Huntsville, at least for another week. And then I'm back to Austin at Hafford Associates as their grant administrator for the state of Texas. So.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Next, we have Yvette.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we have you.
I'm Yvette Barrera. I'm with the Hidalgo County Drainage District number 1. I recently had an employment change. I was part of the committee with the city of McAllen, so I'm not sure what my role would still be since I did have a change of employment, but I can listen in as a guest and participate as necessary.
And we can work that out. We've had a number of folks change positions, and it's from what I understand from GLO, and Colleen, please, I don't want to speak on behalf of the agency, but when this has happened previously, it's your experience that we're most interested in. And if you have interest with others, we've been able to work through that change of position. But again, Colleen, I don't want to get ahead of the agency.
No, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay. So Yvette, we can talk offline, but I think we'd be interested in keeping your expertise with the committee. So next I have Glenn.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a former mayor here in Palacios, Texas, down in Matagorda County, and I'm on the committee number 1.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. Sylvia, are you able to chime in? Or I know you're having some computer difficulties.
Can you all hear me?
Oh, yes. Okay. You were able to call in.
Yeah, I've called in. Hi, everyone. My name is Sylvia Jones. I'm an executive assistant at the GLO, and I am just here to help you all administratively with any things that you may need. And I work closely with Colleen on this. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I have Omar, please.
Yes, this is Omar Saldo. I'm with the Hidalgo County Drainage District number 1 as well. I'm also just listening as a guest.
Thank you for joining. And then last but not least, I have Precinct 1 Payne. Is that Donald?
Yes, this is Commissioner Dude Payne. I'm in my 6th term as County Commissioner, Precinct 1 of Missouri County.
Commissioner, thank you very much for joining us. And we may have others joining as well. It's a tricky time to schedule during the summer, but certainly let's move the discussion along and folks can hopefully chime in as they're able to join. So I did send out an agenda. Have I missed anyone, first of all, before we go forward? Have I missed anyone? Okay, very good. I did send out an agenda, which y'all have received. So as I said, we're going to hear from GLO on any guidance they'd like to offer us. But the main discussion that we want to have today is we've done our survey now. We know what the committee and their stakeholders say the priorities are. How do we now focus in on a program of work for this committee? And as you can see here, there's about 6 areas that various committee members thought we should be prioritizing, around 6 areas around which we converged. And the discussion will be to select amongst those. After some discussion between Amanda and I, we want to make sure we don't spread ourselves too thinly. So we were thinking maybe honing in on 2 or at most 3 areas of work. But before we get to that, I'd like to hear from GLO on any context or advice they may have for the committee. So please, Dr. Jones.
Yes, good morning all, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this morning. We were able to, Sylvia and I, participate in a HUD TA technical assistance basically visit. But as everyone is aware, this was something with the CDBG mitigation grant that the GLO needed to create a committee, at least one committee. Given the geography and the size of the grant for mitigation, we created 2 committees. And I wanted to just give some feedback that HUD gave us during that technical assistance visit before the committee chairs go into a discussion about mission and some of the goals and priorities that you guys might want to undertake moving forward. So one thing that HUD mentioned as a key takeaway was that the North Carolina CAC, which I did listen into one of the, I believe it was their inaugural meeting officially the week before last, that they are using the CAC in order to get input into the action plan amendments. So with an amendment, especially with CDBG-MIT, anytime there's a major change in the programs that come under that grant, there's a period of time where we have to submit amendments to HUD, have public comment, and respond to those public comment, and HUD has to approve the amendment, which can be a long process. So one thing in North Carolina that they are doing is using their CAC to get some input into the draft of those amendments in the direction that the GLO is going with some of its programming. Another item of discussion was how can the GLO bridge the gap between the CAC to current programs in place? So that will come up in your discussion later, is how aware are committee members of the programs currently being offered and the timeline of those programs, so that there is a back and forth between the CAC and the GLO of understanding what's available to the communities that you live and work in. And finally, to be aware of what the charge of the CAC. Obviously, the CAC came on board after the action plan was already approved by HUD. So as I'm talking about amendments, that's one of the reasons North Carolina honed in on amendments, is because it's something that is still will be in formation over the next decade with a 12-year timeline of CDBG-MIT funds, but also that there's some limitations. So we are bound to the rules, the regulations that come under the Federal Register and then the action plan, and we have to adhere to those. So a lot of times you might have an idea, for instance, to decrease the amount of low to moderate income populations that this is just an example, that we actually impact. But that is something that's often written into the Federal Register as not something that is negotiable, if you will. So there are certain things that we will need to continue to communicate about what, and lay some expectations about what we are able to actually have impact on and when things that we don't. So for instance, so we can continue to go over those sorts of things as we go over, for instance, an amendment in the future. The key takeaway that HUD brought to us is how do we, the GLO, utilize the CAC to get information to and from the community. So this two-way interaction of how this communication can happen and how we can utilize to get the word out about GLO programs to the communities, as well as to get the observations and information back from the communities back to the GLO to impact amendments and further grants. So we do think that the CAC has done a great thing in having this survey as a first step of understanding some of the items that need to be addressed. And some of those, as you're aware, are things that the GLO is either currently working on or are limitations that the GLO can't work on. But we need to continue to communicate, and make sure we're all on the same page. We also realize that there is some perhaps ways that we can modify some of our communication strategies so that individuals in the community can more readily access our programs and the different opportunities that we have at the GLO through our programs. So we are happy to be here. We're happy to address questions. We are happy to schedule meetings where updates are provided by the GLO of their different programs. But most of all, we want to make sure that all of you understand that we value your input, and we are hoping that out of this meeting today, we can have a better mission, or you guys can have a better mission of understanding what you're going to focus on so that you can have an impact on how these disaster funds are utilized in the future. And that's my main update, but I'm happy to take any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you, Colleen. Are there any questions for Colleen or GLO? So what I heard from you, Colleen, is potential areas from HUD's perspective, GLO's perspective, might be inputting comments to amendments, commenting, on draft amendments, helping to build those, ensuring awareness of programs and changes in programs. But that really that critical one from their perspective is that two-way communication between the committee members and their stakeholders and the GLO.
Correct.
Okay.
Summary.
And we had an additional member join us. Keith, if you would just please briefly introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Keith Downey. Sorry I'm late. Keith Downey, Super Neighborhood President for Cashmere Garden and also Director of Northeast Houston Redevelopment Council here in Houston.
Thank you for joining us. And you're not late, you're just in time because we're going to kick off discussion now. As I mentioned, Keith, I'm here with my co-chair, Amanda, and we're bringing both committees together because we thought it's time to stop operating in these silos and come together to have this fuller discussion of what is the direction of the committee, in which direction will we like to go. So we're bringing you all together to have that discussion today. And I shared the agenda with potential avenues of work. I navigated these to just a one slide PowerPoint so that we could look at it a little more cleanly together. And this is the discussion that we'd like to have now, right, Amanda? Just get into it. Yeah. Okay. So again, these resulted from our survey. And there was congruence around these 6 potential areas of work. So just to go over each. Blue sky planning, this was an idea to think about how mitigation action plans could be improved in advance of the next disaster. What are ideas that we might like to see? How might they be different? How might they be improved? The second bullet, and there is overlap across these bullets, right? These bullet points, and that's one of the things we'd like to discuss today. The second being advice on specific GLO programs or plans, and that's kind of what Colleen was talking about, providing specific feedback on programs, existing programs, or developing areas of work. The third, engagement, communications, and clarification. There was a lot of interest from the committee in this potential area of work, just given the lack of communication, lack of understanding, really, across the GLO programs, including for things like updates or amendments. How are things changing, and how do we get that information to our communities quickly and efficiently? The fourth bullet, there was some discussion on understanding vulnerability at the local level with local data, because we do use standard measures like low to moderate income, but there are additional measures perhaps that we'd like to be including. The fourth bullet point, or sorry, I'm on the fifth. I'm losing track here. The fifth, policy changes. That's kind of what Colleen talked about with the example of low to moderate income, that's written into the Federal Register. However, there were some comments in the survey talking about the need to gather data to support longer term policy change, whether that's at GLO or at HUD, recognizing that that's not going to happen overnight, but that we could use the committee's voice and data gathering capability to document why some of these challenges, some of these parameters, requirements need to change. And then the final program of work was offered by one of our committee members, and it had some support around it as well. And this would be kind of more of a working group to provide like a FAQ, a frequently answered questions document to application and program procurement that talked about it from the user's perspective. So instead of the GLO's FAQs, it would be the actual grantees, grantors writing this FAQs. So these are the 6 potential areas in which we think we could go. We do have some flexibility, is the last thing that I want to say, in how we might orchestrate this program of work. First of all, we have many years to operate, right? But our standard operating procedures, our committee guidelines note that the committee will be have the duration of 12 years, which is quite a long time. Of course, I don't think that the representation will necessarily be the same that entire time, but it is a really long timeline. So how long these tasks may take, I mean, certainly we don't want to go on in perpetuity, but from what I understand, we could have a couple of years to tackle some of these challenges if we wanted that. I think that timeline is flexible as well. I understand from GLO that we may break out into subgroups or subcommittees, work groups, right? So that not everyone is engaged and working on all of these, but we're able to complete multiple goals. That said, as I discussed, Amanda and I are cognizant that we don't want our program of work to be too big and complex. So Keith, you have a question, please, or comment?
Yeah, I am glad you brought up, difficulties minority communities face dealing with the red tape on recovery and what have you. And that's one thing we have to ensure, not only in large municipalities, but also in small towns. You don't want to have the have and have nots. And so the fact of the matter is that anytime a storm comes along, let's say we have a storm next week, you will have the minority community feeling that they are left out because it's so difficult for them to receive recovery, receive aid, receive, what is needed, because of so many storms that have come along. It's just put us minority communities further and further and further back. So I think that's very important to keep that in mind, to make it more people friendly, with any kind of whatever's being provided for them as far as funding is concerned. And we understand there are parameters. There have to be parameters, but at the same time understand the difficulties that many people face in these communities. And I just wanted to add that.
And I think that's a great point, Keith, because one of the things I think that's the huge focus that you heard a little while ago is how do we as a committee, I guess we're tasked with that, to get the word out to these people in our communities. And I think part of that, understanding our demographics and the challenges that they face, is how do we put it in manageable pieces that they understand and then that they can take some action on if they need it. And so, when Katja and Sylvia and Colleen and I met last week, just to kind of prep for today, that was the big piece that I took away. And so when we look at these, 6 things, how do we pull that together and maybe into either prioritize these, or is there some way to combine them, and really focus on reaching the people in our communities. And I think, Colleen, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, part of that is, being a champion with our elected officials, but part of it is also just reaching those people that you were, talking about, so that they know what to do when, not if, but when, a disaster strikes our communities.
Yes, Charles.
I'd like to give a specific example of what Keith and Amanda just said. Through our long-term recovery group, at the very first HAP meeting in Jasper and Newton County, with the help of our state representative, we had at the meeting, the very first client that would get a HAP house, we had GLO representatives there who knew the client by first name basis. We had the HAP representative that was hired there, and I introduced everybody to everybody before the meeting started, and then after the meeting, they were the first one to get the paperwork filled out. And I don't know what happened, but it took almost 36 months and many, many, many HAP houses built before this couple even got a visit to their property. And in this case, it wasn't communicating to the people in the community, it was communicating with GLO and the HAP representative.
Right.
Now, the end of the story is eventually it happened, but it was extremely emotionally disconcerting to this minority couple who also were in their 80s to have to go through this long process when they were told by GLO, by our state representative, by me, and by the HAP representative, just be there, we'll sign you up and you'll be first.
Right, when that was far from the truth.
Right.
Right. And in that case, maybe there's, right, maybe, and we need to be thinking about intermediaries that can keep that prioritization going with GLO that can keep that fire burning, right? To say this is an immediate need and we need to address this now so it doesn't get. And perhaps my assumption is that it got lost a little bit in the shuffle, but maybe that's not an accurate assumption.
I'm not sure about all the reasons and details. I've just given you an example.
An example, sure. Thank you, sir.
The 3 counties that I represent, one of them is either the poorest or the second poorest county in our state every year. And the majority of the people we help are extremely underprivileged, uneducated. We try to provide an advocate for every, we don't call them clients, we call them neighbors, for every neighbor we help. And even with the advocate, getting answers to our questions, either from the people hired to do the HAP program locally or from the GLO, was very hard, very hard.
Well, and I wonder then if that's, and Keith, I was wondering the same with your comments. Is that only engagement, communications, and clarification, or does it span across one of these other programs of work?
It could span across other programs. I was just typing a note in the chat about communication. Every community has either community leaders or churches that people trust. And that's one of the ways to get information to people, because I believe in going where the masses are. You're able to reach more people, even schools. And we all have a commonality of schools in our communities of various types, what have you. But getting information to them where they can reach the masses is vital. Is very vital. And so I'm looking at this, like local data and understanding vulnerability, understanding those communities that you're trying to serve is important. But I just wanted to share that, but I would have to take a look at these other things on the list to say where else that would fit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and maybe, Amanda mentioned, oh, sorry, Derek, one real quick point. Amanda mentioned maybe some of these bullet points collapse into other ones, right? And maybe understanding vulnerability is part of that communication, right? Communicating so that we understand the conditions on the ground, so that we understand the challenges that these communities are dealing with. So maybe this goes here. Derek, you were going to offer a comment or question?
Yeah, I did want to offer sort of a comment on the application guidance. I think if we can make applications leaner in a certain degree, to go ahead and go through those case studies for different examples in Charles' case and Keith's case, in sort of what the GLO has seen on sort of specific issues with the program guidance for those applications. We could dive into the details to understand where the roadblocks may be, or the different kind of delays that happen. That may be what I would suggest as a program of work to simplify those applications so that the liaisons and the program guidance can be able to be transmitted onto the end users to have their situations kind of look at in detail and understand where kind of delays have happened in the past to fix them for the future.
Right, okay. And is that part of advising GLO on specific programs and plans, or is it separate from that?
I think it goes into more in general communications than on specific programs and plans sometimes. And it almost could be a blue sky planning, I think, about how can communication be like preset, to know where communication is important and for the communities and how to target it prior to, having an event and then scrambling.
Interesting.
But that's just my thought.
What does the committee think of that?
I like it.
Communication in blue sky.
I have a question about the data that GLO gathers in the application process. How much of GLO data comes from the FEMA applications?
I'd probably have to table that a little bit because that's not my area of expertise, but I do know that there has to be some sharing of information from FEMA because there has to be some insurance of not duplication of benefits, and so that that we haven't given someone grant funds when they're not eligible because of what they already accepted through FEMA.
The reason I ask the question is, again, in our area, the people we try to help, most of the time, I don't know what percentage, but most of the time they originally fill out the FEMA application within hours or a day after the disaster, and they are denied, not because their situation is deniable, but because they didn't understand the application. They left something blank or put it in the wrong space. And until they reach out to us, we don't know how to help them and appeal the denial and refile the application. And I wonder if denials show up as non-existent data, or how that would affect GLO. And I realize this is not a Citizens Advisory Committee to FEMA, but I wondered how the two mix together.
So what I'm hearing you say is that really there needs to be some education on the application flow, which then impacts like from FEMA to GLO and how that is impacted based on how they fill it out. And just some education in general about what type of data they need to gather in order to be to have a successful application.
Colleen, I totally agree with Charles. I find the same thing with many of the applicants that we have seen in our communities as well. They don't understand, and as any tutorial or understanding what I'm filling out, or they leave something out, but also the follow-up. If they left something out, can someone reach out to them to say, why did you leave this blank? Did you understand the question or what have you? I know that takes time and effort, but it's very important because you'll end up with the residents that feel left out because it took so long for someone to get back to them. And I tell people, if you haven't heard back from someone in a reasonable amount of time, reach out and find out, maybe you missed a call or what have you, but follow up on your own information of your own application is very important.
And Keith, your point there about having a trusted partner in that process is so key very often, because trainings and modules, virtual trainings or online guidance or something is much different than having somebody that you trust speaking to you about what needs to be gathered, how you can put it forward. It seems to me that this committee has potentially a lot of power in being that, helping that kind of hub and spokes model for getting more assistance to these communities.
Agreed.
So far I've heard a lot in the communications realm.
Yeah, I wonder if we need to, if that really just needs to be our focus. right now. Not saying that these other things aren't important, but I'm wondering if that's where moving forward in this next year of work or whatever, whatever that timeline is, if that's where our focus really needs to be.
Yeah. And what is our timeline, right, Amanda? Like,
Yeah.
we don't want to bite off more than we can chew here.
Right.
Are we going in a year chunk? Are we going in 2-year chunks? I think we need a little bit more refinement on that as well. But I agree with you that there's a lot of energy around this communications clarification, which does bleed into a bit the
Yes.
or wrong term, but it does I think help the program development. But are there, before we move concertedly in that direction, are there any examples from the committee members that they'd like to offer on specific GLO programs or plans that we should be focusing on?
Before we move too much farther, I just wanted to briefly bring up a point, if I could, because one of the things especially on communication, in very small rural communities like we have here in Palacios, the only really source of information involving GLO programs, and 9 times out of 10 is the city itself.
Mm-hmm.
And by expanding the representatives are reaching out to communities and how to get the word out through the community leaders and stuff is very important, because in a small community such as ours, you're looking at administration of 4 to 6 people total. So one person usually gets tasked with being the point of contact on the programs and how to help the community. And often they're overwhelmed already because there's been a disaster of some type. So the more we open up the avenues of communication for these small communities, the more beneficial it is for the residents. Just my 2 cents there.
No, Mary, I appreciate that very much. Coming from a highly rural, small town area myself in the Coastal Bend, I very much appreciate that. And how do we understand when those community leaders change as well, right? Maybe they don't change that frequently, but we've had a lot of change since Hurricane Harvey in the Coastal Bend. And how do we understand who those new community leaders become is also important.
Well, I think that gets back to the local data for understanding the vulnerability there. Understanding your local community through communication, you got it noted there. I think that's a very important point, that there's some type of mechanism in place for updating data especially for the small rural communities. I mean, you get around the Houston area and areas metropolitan, it's much easier, but it's so much harder to get the word out in a small community.
Well, and Keith, I think even in more urban areas, in some of the neighborhoods that you partner with, you have similar challenges. Is that right?
Oh, we do. We definitely do. In the northeast side of Houston is, they don't get information the same way, should I say, we don't, we're Wi-Fi challenged. Many people do not have Wi-Fi capable connectivity. The fact of the matter is it's word of mouth, just like it is in most. That's the best way. Indian signals are the best way. But I'm saying that the old way is the prudent way, because people tell other people, and I tell everybody, we all have networks. I know people you don't know, vice versa. And spreading word of mouth is one thing, but that's some of the challenges we have of getting the information out equitably and evenly. It just won't happen. One size doesn't fit all. So that being said, you have to go to your trusted institutions, libraries, churches, schools, what have you, and you ask those people that are in charge to help you get the word out of what you're trying to do. And don't wait until a disaster to spread the word to say, this is becoming available. I do this personally. I do this on a 7-day-a-week basis. And I do this even holidays. But the fact of the matter is getting information out to people. People are perishing from a lack of knowledge and they just don't get the information. Sometimes they're at work, they're at the doctors, they're doing different things. But whatever you're putting out there, make sure you're doubling up and doing it again and getting that same information out because someone might have missed it.
I think it's maybe important to note also that the word of mouth is always the quickest way to get anything done in a small town. I mean, you
Yes.
whisper it on one side of town, they're going to know it in 10 minutes later on the other side of town. But it's a double-edged sword sometimes because when the case like Charles had, where there was a problem with the elder lady and gentleman were the first in and the last out. That double-edged sword of that is the bad word about what's going on travels just as fast as a good word. It's sometimes not faster. So a lot of folks who are getting the wrong information or getting bad data can be bad mouthing the programs as much as the ones that are benefiting by it.
So true.
That's a very good point. And that can breed, further mistrust and misunderstanding as well. And sometimes there's inaccurate data that spreads as well. Let's be candid about that, right? So how do we ensure that the correct information is getting out and getting out effectively and creating the change that we intend it to create, right? That's the whole point.
So what does that look like? Is that creating some sort of, I hate to use the word database, but something so that we can get back to the GLO? Again, it has to be some sort of constant working document, right? On how and where we need to be communicating after these types of incidents. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here, thinking about your point, Keith, because I mean, you know who those people are, but how does the GLO, or how do we help the GLO and others to get that information out, especially in those small rural areas?
One of the things, I was a disaster case manager serving 210 households after Harvey, and we addressed unmet needs. And so we also go to meetings with long-term recovery, which are other nonprofits in the city of Houston, what have you. But the fact of the matter is we have a database of those people that we did serve. And those people helped us spread the word of what we were able to provide. We were able to also give out information. I don't just give out food boxes when we're giving out, food for vulnerable people, but we also give out information in those boxes that they can take with them, printed documents, printed information, and applications. So I think that going upon databases that are out there now with groups that did serve and help those doing Harvey could help. Because we know in the case of another storm, we know those same people will probably need help, more than likely. So that's one of the things I would add to this.
Right. And it may look different in different communities. Charles, were you going to offer a question or a comment as well?
Agreeing with all of it. First, I want to say, after Harvey and all the other hurricanes and storms and floods we've had, it seems to me that the GLO communicated very, very well with all of the government agencies, politicians, etc. I tried to go to all of those meetings. But once it got to all of our local elected officials and agencies, it did not get communicated well to the average citizen who needs a whole lot of help. And I live and work with these people every day, so I understand the struggles they go through, but just reading through information, knowing where to go get the application, that didn't flow out from those that the GLO face-to-face presentations were made. It didn't really flow out, even though at our libraries, signs were put up, the radio station announced, like the mayor said and Keith said, it was the word of mouth. And I want to give you both a positive and negative example. 3 weeks ago, we received 22 pallet loads of a product that we had planned to give away to 8 school districts to use during the summer. I'm not sure how, but word got out that we were giving away free bleach. And with no preparation, we turned into a distribution center with a line forming through the parking lot and all the way out on the street and down the street. And trying to let the people know this, first off, it didn't contain any bleach. And second, they didn't have the equipment to use it. And it was a real struggle for about 6.5 hours to deal with all the people showing up. They communicated well, they just had the wrong information. And let me word it this way. It seems like we are living in a high-tech 21st century trying to communicate with people who are still living in the 1950s.
That's a big challenge when you put it that way. That's an enormous challenge. But it takes people that know their communities to address that kind of challenge. And that's why you all are here, because you know what's going to work or not work in your community. And it may look a little different across the affected counties and jurisdictions. But I think we're very much focusing on this communication, engagement aspect, clarification aspect of a potential program of work. I think Amanda and I, and along with Derek and Shelley, the leadership group, perhaps we can take this offline and massage it a bit, and get back to you with what we heard a potential program of work might be. And more, how can we parse it out into manageable action items, right? So that maybe, like I said, we can do work groups or something like that, and actually make stepwise progress on achievable goals. Something of an actual plan and a timeline. What do folks think about a timeline, though? I know we only have a few minutes left here, though. Do we want to have the measuring stick be a year out? Do we want it to be 2 years? Do we want to look at progress that we've achieved in 6-month increments, something like that? What do you think a program of work like this, what's that going to take?
I think, oh, I'm sorry, this is Christy. I've just been listening. But it just seems that with 6-month intervals, I think honestly, you would have a better idea of what's working and what's not. It just seems that there are a multitude of issues in terms of what GLO is trying to do. One, get the information out to the public, but also a lot of the changes have to occur in-house. And when I say that, I'm saying in the event of doing these action plans, we need to be able to not just convey what we're wanting to convey out to the public, but people reading these plans, because these plans are long, they have to know what they're looking at. How does it apply to their individual communities, and how can they roll out a similar plan that's most effective to help them through mitigation process, pre-disaster, but also post-disaster. I've been doing this for a number of years now, and the one thing that seems to be consistent is a lot of our public are not necessarily understanding process and protocols to actually get the assistance that they're needing whenever a disaster occurs. But as we go through this process time and time again, they need to know what can they do to alleviate some of the potential issues that they may have should another event occur. With our communities over here, like I'm in Huntsville right now, and one of the issues that we seem to consistently keep having is communication in terms of understanding with GLO programs, how can it best benefit us to get the aid that's needed. Also, we've worked with other agencies like FEMA. We've worked with TDM. It just seems that there's so much red tape. And basically, I'm in charge of all the red tape around here, kind of maneuvering through it. But we were getting so much information and it's confusing a lot of people. So one of the things that I think may benefit GLO in terms of not just getting information out, but there needs to be a consistent plan that's put into place where everyone actually understands what's the end goal. What is it that they can do to help their communities be self-sufficient in terms of getting through a process of disasters. Going through the implementation guide, I can tell you, I've dealt with folks over here. When I show them the guide, I get deer in the headlights because they don't want to read something that comprehensive. Comprehension is good if you like that kind of thing, but we need to be able to get something a little bit more, oh boy, what's the word I'm looking for? You know how they say when you're trying to sell something, you only have a person's attention for maybe a few minutes, and then after that, it's
A pitch.
gone.
Yeah, you need like an elevator pitch. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm not saying that's going to be the solution, but we need to get something that's going to resonate with the community to say, okay, I can do this. I understand this. But if they're not understanding what they're looking at and they're not understanding processes, they're just not going to take the time and initiative to move forward to do what needs to be done. I'm sorry, I'm fighting allergies over here too.
Oh no, Chris, no, that was that was really very helpful. And I think I like that. I like that assessment, and I think it dovetails nicely with what we're talking about. Sandra, and I have a hand raised from you, and then we're going to have to cut comments because we're unfortunately at time, but please, Sandra.
Okay, no, I was just liking what she was going with that. You have to keep the people interested and keep they focused in order to move forward, because I'm one of those people. You give me something and I got to read through it just to find the information on that one line I'm looking for. I'm not going to look for it. I'm not going to go through all that, the sifting. They need to put something in place. Well, they would get to the point to the residents and let them know this is what's happening. And like she say, self-sufficient. We need to start trying to be self-sufficient because we see we don't have no people to really help us. So if we were to work together as y'all put it out there in layman terms where we'll understand it and then we go at it and work with it, maybe we will be able to do self-sufficient. But if you give me a literature book and I'm looking only for a needle in a haystack, I'm gonna put that whole thing down and I'm gonna let you come tell me what I need to know, because I'm not gonna read through all that. I just wanted to piggyback off what she was saying. It was interesting. I'm sorry, and I was
No,
late.
not at all. I think that's a key point, and it fits in well with what Keith and Charles and the mayor were talking about earlier. I think it absolutely hits home with this. So,
yeah, because I'm waiting on GLO right now, has been waiting for 2 years, and I'm about to go over to this lady's house where they did her house, and they left this lady in a sham. So we got too many complaints with GLO and how they're doing us, because if you don't know better, you don't get better done. But they have called on us to come out and try to rectify the problem. She has a messed up yard with branches and trees and water bottles under the grass they planted. So we asked them to remove it and do it right. So it was all kinds of backlash. So I'm on my way over there now with the media, and we're going to see if we can rectify this problem, because you shouldn't have to go through all this to get something done right the first time around. Shouldn't have to go 2 or 3. It's because of the area we in when they don't do it right. So, hey, I'm going to do what I got to do.
Well,
But
and
I
we
think-
appreciate you, Sandra. And I think these are the types of examples that we need to be gathering so we can understand the root of the problem. So Amanda, you were going to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that goes back to that whole thing. How do we put it in digestible chunks or
Chunks,
whatever
yeah.
that people can understand, to your point. So they're not getting this big old manual and they have no idea where to start. And so I think that is it's a great opportunity for us to be able to put some thoughts, some framework, some actionable items around that.
So why don't we do that then? The committee leadership team, Amanda, myself, Derek, and Shelley will take what we talked about here today and put a draft back at y'all about here's what we heard, here's where we think where and how we think we could move forward. And we'll invite your input with that. We might ask you to break into work groups, or if we need to pull everybody back together to have a discussion, we can do that too. But we'll propose a way forward. We have the holiday, of course. Happy July 4th, enjoy that time with your friends and family, but you'll be hearing from us in probably a couple weeks. Does that sound good?
Sounds
Sounds
good.
great.
All right,
Thank you
everyone.
guys for your input today. This was great.
Yeah, have a healthy, safe, happy holiday, and you'll be hearing from us very soon.
You do the same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Y'all have a blessed day.
Thank you.